Prior to the pandemic, Atlanta was my second home, a place where I worked and played. And it was there, while doing an event in 2019, when I decided to put out Apeman Rex. At this particular event, I was reading new poetry and selling my usual young adult books. And it was cool. I mean, I loved what I was doing, truly I did. But I kept having this desire to do something greater, something that reached everyone of all ages. I wanted to bridge the gap between genres and audiences, bring us all together. And so I thought of Apeman Rex, a story I'd written earlier that year. The funny thing is, I'd sent Apeman Rex to many agents and publishers, but they all rejected it, claiming not to know what to do with it. I guess I can understand why. It was a pretty far out concept. Of course, where the idea came from was even more far out, especially since it started as a joke. You see, in 2011, I published a book called Bloom about twin sisters obsessed with a video game called Apeman Rex. The game followed an ape who fought robots in the 31st century. Well, my cousin and I joked that maybe I should turn that fictional game into a book of its own. And the rest is history. So after my trip to Atlanta, I polished the story, drew the illustrations, begged my good friend Chris to format the manuscript, which he did because he's incredible, and then put out Apeman Rex some weeks later. Needless to say, I was in love with the book. It was mythology, fairy tale, a throwback to my origins of mixing words and pictures together as a child. It also harked back to the cartoons and movies and video games I'd grown up on. Bold, colorful entertainment that appealed both to children and adults. There was only one problem. Just a couple months after Apeman Rex was released, the pandemic arrived and everything fell apart. Promoting a book during a global catastrophe is not ideal, and certainly not feasible, especially when, like everyone else, you feel frightened and full of uncertainty. So I did what I always do in times of crisis. I threw myself into literature. And Apeman Rex 2 was the first project I worked on. Although I came up with the idea of a robot viral outbreak a year prior, the pandemic amplified the book's thematic potency and made the experience more cathartic and therapeutic than I could have ever imagined. As I typed away, I was able to pour my emotions into a book that I knew would have a much happier ending than the world I was living in. And that felt amazing. Throughout the rest of 2020, I wrote 5 more books, and then in 2021, I decided to experiment with poetry and film. But Apeman Rex remained on my brain, so by the end of last year, I was ready to go back to that wild, imaginative world. Part of that desire came from wanting to reach all ages again, to create some form of unity and harmony in a world that seems increasingly more fractured. But another part of that was because my own life at that time was at such a dark, low point. I'd lost one of my closest friends and collaborators and needed an escape myself. Apeman Rex 2 provided that. So I re-released the first book while preparing for the second. I then took my usual trip to Blix for art supplies. I did all of the illustrations and poured over the cover art. I finalized the manuscript and begged Chris to help again, which he did because he's still incredible. I created a soundtrack to complement the book's vibe, and I created the cover's layout. I originally had the release date set for March 10th, and everything seemed to be going well, until the book leaked on Amazon due to a technical error. At first, I was destroyed, wishing it had all gone as planned, but then I realized that if people can have the book early, then why not? Why not give them that chance to dream and escape, to be elsewhere? So now the book's out, and I couldn't be happier. Apeman Rex has restored my faith and love for what I do. It's taken me back to why I began writing in the first place. It's reminded me that there is nothing better than storytelling, than taking people away from their lives, even just for a moment. That's all I wish to do, and that's all I'll ever do.